Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the first listening log update of 2019, where I go over all of the new releases I listened to in a given month. This month, I have 8 albums I've listened to. I have 1 EP request in the docket. If you'd like to see what albums I have on the log right now, it's linked in the description along with ratings for any singles I've listened to in the last month as well. It's organized by month. I have requests after that, and everything else is at the very end. With all of the introductions and formalities out of the way, let's talk about some music.
Pride. Well, to be honest, you're kind of a goddess, but being with you kind of kills me inside. You want me to explain it? Well, it's sort of this.
This was the first album I figured I would be talking about this year. There were no surprise releases like there were last year. This month was a pretty stagnant month for releases. There's some albums I didn't get to that dropped that I had seen stirred about in the conversation, but I figured Complaint was going to be the first one I listened to. Because I'm an avid, mild Watsky fan. You know, I really liked his earlier material. I actually reviewed his catalog up to a certain point in a discography review years ago, which I'll link in the description if you're curious about my opinions on this other material. I think he's been a little inconsistent over his last couple of records, but he hasn't made anything I would wholly say I hated. And Complaint is another record that I don't think I hate. You know, I like it about as much as Times Infinity, but for different reasons. Times Infinity had a pretty serious tone to it. There's a lot of melancholic overtones to some of the music, and that's not gone here, but he's decided to really add a lot more sarcastic nuance to his music that was present in his earlier releases. Songs like Welcome to the Family, All Like Whatever, and No Complaints, No Conversation, and Mean Ass Drunk feel like him trying to reimagine his first record's sound, and I think it works. Even if the instrumental on Mean Ass Drunk sounds a little too much like Feel It Still, he has a little more of an atmosphere, the rapper tinge on here, but I don't hate that personally. I also don't hate that it's super short. Like, it's a pretty brief record, and given that, again, a lot of hip-hop is pretty bloated outside of some key projects that dropped last year, I don't mind that a rapper in the alternative scene is foregoing that mindset and bringing just a tighter package all around. I don't think every song comes together all that well. What Goes Up is probably the best out of the 2 auto-tune tinge songs. Feels alright, feels like it's trying to spin some of the sounds from Cardboard Castles into something fresh, and I don't think it wholly comes together all that well. But Watsky's lyrical prowess is harnessed really well on the tracks I mentioned before that reinvent his first album sound. I love the instrumental to Welcome to the Family, and its hook is fantastic. Same with No Complaints, No Conversation. And I think Limos for Emos and Whitecaps are really two stronger efforts to close out the project. It feels a little less high concept than some of his records have in the past, but I'm perfectly alright with that. For a rapper entering kind of his almost 10th year in the prominent zeitgeist outside of doing his beat jazz poetry stuff, it's cool to see him still presenting decent records. If you like his earlier projects, you might like doses of this. It's alright. It's pretty solid. It's a lot better than I was honestly expecting it would be. I give this like a 6 out of 10. Really solid effort.
Out here, pigs play metal like kettle drums. Turn a quick deli trip to a temple running belly laugh. Rebel.
Now, as you guys might know, I'm a pretty big Aesop Rock fan. If you didn't know, I reviewed his discography last year, outside of his collaborative projects like Malibu Ken. But I fucking love Aesop Rock, and this was honestly my introduction to tobacco in this collaborative effort, Malibu Ken, and I really fucking like this thing. I think that it flexes Aesop's storytelling abilities in a different way. He talks about himself in a very sarcastic manner, and it works really well. And I think this is a really tight project. Again, a pretty brief listen, which I'm perfectly okay with. You know, shit like Tuesday cracks me the fuck up. I love 1 + 1 is 23 with the way Aesop raps over it. Aesop, all around, super consistent on this project. The one folly I see within this record is the production. I love the lo-fi aesthetic, and I think it enhances some of the more low-key styles Aesop is twisting on this project, but I feel like there are some instances on here where it gets a little repetitive. Some of the instrumentals sound a little too similar to each other, and some of the hook work doesn't really do a whole lot for me. But I like that it's weird. I like that it's different. I like that it's something that it almost reminds me of some of the tracks I had heard that he was putting out on the Uninvited. It's a twist on Aesop's sound without losing the character of Aesop, or from what I'm guessing is the sound of Tobacco. Again, I'm very unfamiliar with Tobacco's production work, his electronic work. I like a lot of it here. Swordbox is probably my favorite instrumental personally. It almost sounds like Ace is rapping over a Sega Genesis, but he bends around the instrumentals of like Save Our Ship. Really fucking cool. Like, Ace just sounds cool, and the instrumentals, when they aren't sounding too similar to each other, are fresh. I love the lushness on 1 + 1 = 13 and Acid King. Fucking so cool. And again, it's like a fucking Sega Genesis in the dopest way possible. But some of those follies aside, I do give this thing like an 8 out of 10. Really great effort, really fun, tight hip-hop outing from a dude that I figured I would love to hear more of this year.
A bite or a scorpion sting, grab a torch and a whip, then we'll torch in the whip, then we'll go for some chick.
Now, one of the records I didn't expect to see this year was something new from Mcchris. Mcchris, if you don't know, is a nerdy rapper who tends to use his platform to reflect in different ways parts of his life in very small instances, while also writing incredibly dorky songs about very niche things within nerd culture, and that's why I really enjoy him. And in Mcchrisisgoodmusic, he brings out some sounds that I hadn't heard from him in a while. And there's I'm gonna be honest, I haven't listened to the last couple of Mcchris releases, but seeing how much hype he was putting behind this outing, it was something that was pretty prominent in my feed, and I was excited to check it out. The skits, still funny, still fucking hilarious. I love that he's still building this very nuanced and inside joke feeling world within his skits, and I think that it's fucking great. I love the shit with him and his manager. I think that shit like Soft Suggestion List, really funny. One of the best skits I've heard from him in a while. Same with Shkreli, fucking hilarious. And outside of that, a lot of the actual songs on here, really good. Mcchris 2020 is just a scathing outlashing at our current political landscape, which I didn't fully expect from Mcchris, but I think he handles it really gracefully. C-3PO is just him rapping about being C-3PO, and Nuggets is a song professing a love of chicken nuggets. It's an Mcchris project. There's a lot of really funny, very niche shit here, but I think he handles it really gracefully, as he has done on some of his better records in the past. I think he has a relatively consistent discography, but there are always shining moments out there that have him at his tightest. Mcchris is Dead is my favorite record of his, but this is pretty up there as a consistent tight package. It balances funniness with well-done instrumentals. Some of the shit on here reminds me of his older stuff. Like, I'm talking like Life's a Bitch and I'm Her Pimp era Mcchris, with some shit that reminds me of shit like Hoodie Ninja. He balances those pseudo mindless self-indulgent style instrumentals with those really poppy sounding instrumentals really well. Really, the only negative critique is that I didn't revisit every song all that much. Some of the tracks in the tail end, like Foxy Nazi, didn't really lend themselves to multiple revisits from me. Some of the jokes, just once you're done with them, you're done with them. And while I like Nuggets and Gordita Crunch, they're not like C. Donathano or Mcchris 2020 or Mcchrisisgoodmusic that I feel like are more re-listenable than those. Still, really good record. Give this thing like an 8 out of 10. Fantastic release from Mcchris, if you ask me, as a fan of Mcchris. But I'm not on my own.
Before I get into the review proper, I just want to say, I know Crash has talked about this as well, but fuck the Spotify video thing instead of having just the album art with the song. I'm sick of that shit. I just want the album art with the song titles. It makes recording parts for this segment a fucking nightmare.
This is the first time I've really talked about James Blake on the channel, and I'm a moderate fan of his stuff. I like his first couple of records. He's not an artist that I consistently keep up with. This is the first album I've checked of his since Overgrown, but I like his first two records really well. I think they're tight, alt R&B records from this decade that I think present him as an interesting perspective in the genre. I love his production. I love the way he pulls shit together. And on this record, I feel like he's developed his sound more. He's fleshed it out a little more. But I don't think it's as consistent as those earlier projects. In fact, the first leg of this record doesn't really do anything for me. The record doesn't really pick up to me until Barefoot in the Park, which is a beautiful sentimental track with Rosalia. I love the guest work on here, at least as far as she goes and Andre 3 Stacks. I think Travis Scott's alright. The Metro Boomin collaborations don't really do anything for me, though. Like, I don't think his touches to Mile High and Tell 'Em do as much for me as they might for others. That Andre 3 Stacks verse, though. Are we going to have another year where Andre's just going to feature on a bunch of people's stuff and doesn't actually put out an album? Because if so, that fucking sucks. But, nevertheless, everything around that is really good. I love the really somber aesthetic that he's still going with, but it feels, again, more harnessed. You know, the closing out of this record, Lullaby for My Insomniac, feels very droning and lulling, but in a very beautiful way.
Something else that carries out on one of the shining moments in that first leg, Into the Red. It's another track with this kind of hypnotic sound that I feel like James Blake knocks out of the fucking park.
I love how just soulful he gets at some moments on here. I think the nuance he puts into the backdrops really enhances some of these romantic sentiments or some of these modern ideals of the romantic landscape are painted in here. There's a lot of artists that I feel like try to showcase what love and relationships are like in the modern era, but I don't think they do it quite like this, and that's why I really like this thing. I love the images it paints, and I love how the writing and the atmospheres and production blend together so harmoniously. And James Blake's performance on here really ties a lot of that together. It's just a little bit of a mess at the start, but once it gets going, it generates a lot of momentum, and it keeps that pace really fucking well. I give this thing like a 7 out of 10. Not nearly as bad as it could have been, given I know he had some missteps between here and his better Golden Age material, but I think this is a really nice comeback for him personally. Solid work, really solid work.
They hooked on Peruvian, got the boosting. They only won the lane, taught them game. First.
As you guys might have seen in my January update, as you guys might have seen in my conversation talking about albums I was excited for this year, this record was on there. Free Sweatpants by Blockhead, and man, did I really like this thing. The features he chose to use when he used them fit his instrumental style. As I said in that conversation, I fucking love the collab with Aesop Rock. It was dope to hear him spit over Blockhead production again. But on top of that, Slippery Slope is a fucking amazing cut. Open Mic is so goddamn smooth on there. Arm & Hammer on Be Safe fucking kills that tune. And on top of that, all of the instrumental shit between that has this really lush atmospheric tone. You know, one of my big hesitations to this was I didn't know how Blockhead was going to manage to make the non-feature shit work. You know, RJD2 had a really bad problem with that on his last outing, and he's a DJ, producer who used to work a lot with Def Jux, like Blockhead did, and I was hesitant. But Blockhead really stuck the landing here. A fantastic release. It doesn't have this overall concept, but every single rapper feels cohesive on here. It feels like they could have really worked together on more tracks, you know. I would have loved to have seen Mark Specht on a track with Homeboy Sandman, who fucking kills his track too. I mean, so many good verses from so many good rappers. Some of that lush sound that Blockhead used on his work back in the day, but it feels more vibrant because of the enhancements in production quality. Love this thing. Really good effort. 8 out of 10. Another strong hip-hop release to come out this year so far.
About is everybody else, and you just can't quit.
So, I'm a very moderate Bring Me the Horizon fan. I slept on their last couple of records, and I still haven't listened to them. In fact, the only record of theirs that I've listened to that I really enjoy was There's a Hell, Believe Me, I've Seen It, because it melded their deathcore aesthetic with some subtly shifted in sound electronic tones that I feel like suited their sound really well. I'm not big on deathcore, so their first couple of records didn't do a whole lot for me, but for some reason, I didn't listen to Sempiternal or That's the Spirit, which I've heard are much better releases. However, I didn't want to pass up on Mo when it first dropped, in case I really enjoyed it. You know, I didn't listen to any of the lead-up singles. I went into this relatively blind, and I wasn't wholly disappointed, you know. I like bits of these songs. I like ideas that are here, and I like some of the songs outright. Mantra, Wonderful Life, Medicine, Mother Tongue, and the closer especially, with it and Wonderful Life's outros, with those very boisterous and huge in scope atmospheres and orchestration. They are the peak of what I expected with this record, you know, on top of the writing in those tracks are very strong and very, very heartfelt. You know, the contributions from their collaborators work really well on those songs. Even Mantra, I really, really enjoy its full package. I feel like the writing, when it's strong, it's really good, but there are plenty of instances, like on Why You Gotta Kick Me When I'm Down, Sugar, Honey, Ice, and Tea, and Heavy Metal. I know some people really like heavy metal. That song does nothing for me. I think that it's just a thing that, I get it, I get why people like it, just me personally, I don't care. You know, I didn't fall out of love with them because they're not a metal band, you know, or not a metal band anymore. They're chasing some trends. That's fine if you can do it well. You know, other bands in the past have done the whole shift in sound thing, and they've made it work. And I think they do, in some instances. They haven't completely fallen on their face. You know, those songs all work really well. But the tracks I just mentioned, I don't think Nihilist Blues comes together as well as I was hoping. I think Grimes' part is nice. I would have liked to have seen more. I think the writing on that song is good. I think that that's just the epitome of, that's an idea I would have expected better from them on, given their stuff that I've heard previously. And I think just tonally, it just kind of flops a little bit all over the place in many ways. It's a little tonally inconsistent, and so as a product, it feels a little bit like a mishmash. I do enjoy, again, aspects of this, and I think that it's not the worst thing I've heard. For a band trying to chase trends, or chasing some trends, they do better than some of the bands I discussed last year, but they aren't as good as other bands that have done it as well, like Inner Shikari with their last project. You know, not the worst thing I think I'll ever hear this year, by far, but it's pretty average as a result. I give it like a 5 out of 10. You know, when I had seen that Trent and Atticus did the soundtrack for Bird Box, I was a little surprised, only because that movie sucked, and I don't remember really much about the soundtrack. But in an isolated setting, the soundtrack's pretty effective. It's very minimalist. A lot of the longer songs, like Careful What You Wish For, Outside, and Looking Forwards and Backwards, build on these small little details that reoccur in the songs while adding different layers of electronics and pianos. They have a lot of the idiosyncrasies that they've delved with on their soundtracks to, like, Patriots Day and even the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo soundtrack a little bit, but it still feels fresh, you know. And you could say again, that little bias, because I fucking love Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and I really like their soundtrack work, but it's better than some of the other soundtracks of theirs that I've heard in the past. I like this more than the one they did for that documentary. I even like this more than the mid-90s one, and I liked the mid-90s one because it was different for them. I like that this feels a little bit more of a melding of the Nine Inch Nails aesthetic with their soundtrack stuff, like Bad Witch was, and like the Patriots Day soundtrack was. And I like that it is a lot more stripped down and stripped back outside of moments where it gets really, really intense and erratic. You know, I think that they're still consistent as score makers, which, given how prolific they've been in recent years, that's impressive on its own merit. You know, they have an aesthetic, they haven't worn it out yet, and I still really enjoy their sound, even if it's tied to a fucking dog shit movie like Bird Box. 8 out of 10 for the soundtrack. Really fucking good. Yeah, I was just really impressed, personally.
What happens to people? Liquid
Deerhunter's another band that's really big in the indie scene that I've never talked about on the channel. I've listened to their stuff in pockets. I like them. You know, I like them as much as any other popular indie band. I don't think they're as consistent as other bands in the indie scene, but I don't think anybody thinks that about Deerhunter. And this album is just boring. You know, I listened to it a handful of times, and outside of the really lush aesthetic on Greenpoint Gothic and Futurism and on other coatings on bits of the record, there isn't a whole lot that I walked away from really remembering or enjoying. You know, I like that they're spinning this kind of chamber pop aesthetic into a very psychedelic world. You know, I don't think a lot of bands are really doing that, but I don't think they're doing anything wholly interesting with it. There's a lot of this record that feels very monotonous and just very flaccid. You know, the band doesn't sound very boisterous. Given how textured some of these instrumentals sound, I was expecting a little bit more, especially given of a band of this caliber. Even though they are slowly degrading into past mediocrity, I wanted more from this thing. I wanted a better utilization of their talents. And yeah, this game was pretty bad. You know, like a 4 out of 10. Probably the worst thing I've heard this month, without a doubt, without question. But maybe that's just me. Either way, that's really going to wrap up the month. I know it's a really short introduction to the year, but, you know, I figured I'd keep it simple since there wasn't a whole lot. Why is he calling me right now? This might be an emergency. Hold on. Hello?
Johnny, my man, you over there recording that listening log update? You gonna include the Teal album?
Hey John, what's up? How did you know I was filming right now?
Well, Johnny, I just have this, we met in person, and I just feel like I know you on that kind of deeper level. I know when you're doing something, and I know when you're forgetting things, too. And you better not sleep on the Teal album.
I mean, yeah, I wasn't gonna talk about it until February. I mean, I listened to it, but...
Honestly, it took a lot to take me away from the Teal album. It's an amazing covers record. Rivers Cuomo is a part of it. What more convincing do you need, Johnny? If you're gonna keep stalling like this, I can't stand for it. Goodbye, sir.
Let's talk about the Teal album. So if you've watched the listening log updates last year, I'm no stranger to covering covers albums. I'm actually really into covers albums. I talked about Ninja Sex Parties, I talked about Burn the Priests, and Power Gloves. I like when bands interpret a song and either do it in their own way or do a kind of a pseudo karaoke style version of it. I don't mind the latter if it's done really well. And on the Teal album, I feel like Weezer does do it really well on a couple of instances. Happy Together, fucking great. I liked Mr. Blue Sky a lot. And I really liked Paranoid. It was pretty cool. I don't think it's the best Weird Black Sabbath cover I've heard, but it's pretty serviceable. Even Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. Like, there's instances on here that I think really work, but when you have a band that wholly embraces the 80s aesthetic, like Ninja Sex Party, who's done 2 covers albums, and some of the songs on this album better, it's hard to not make that comparison. And personally, I think Weezer's version of Take On Me is nowhere near as good as Ninja Sex Party's. Same with Africa and Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Or their take on a Michael Jackson cut. While they did not do Billie Jean, I think Ninja Sex Party could do it better. Mostly because of the type of singer that Rivers is. I think there's a reason why Weezer so wholly embraced and accelerated the prominence of alt-rock in the 90s, and that's because of Rivers' singing style. I don't think it works for tracks where you're needed to belt. He's not much of a belter. He can do it in some songs, but normally he's a pretty mellow, smooth singer. I think the No Scrubs cover is whatever. It's a joke. I know a lot of this album is meant to be a joke, but as a covers album, some of it works really well. Happy Together is great. Even on a song where you are supposed to kind of belt a little bit, Rivers pulls it off gracefully. And I think it's because of the type of song that Happy Together is. I just don't think they do that whole 80s synth style justice.
Yeah, and outside of the instances that I don't think it comes together all that badly.
I know it's meant to be a fun, stupid record, and a lot of it works in that way. That's why I don't really hate the No Scrubs cover. It is what it is. But I feel like, given some of the songs that they chose to do, and their Everybody Wants to Rule the World cover is fine. Again, I've just heard other bands in recent years do that better. With that in mind, I give it like a 6 out of 10. It's passable. It's Weezer having fun. And ultimately, while I am a bit of a critical asshole, I can't knock them for having fun. I can't knock the hustle. And that is going to be my month. It's going to be January. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you are excited for the rest of these updates throughout the year. If you have an album you would like for me to check out that is tentatively going to drop in 2019, leave it in the comments. I'll add it to the list, or if it's already on there, I'll move it up to the requested section. Thank you, John, for the cameo. You guys probably know who he is. If not, his channel's linked down below. I'm going to go. Thank you for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.